And I started doing them because I kept meeting these really amazing women, and I would be like, oh, do you know this person? And the answer was always no. I was like, why doesn't anybody in Tacoma know each other? Like, why don't these amazing business owners collaborate and work together? And so, just like out of my back pocket, I made an event, and we had 42 people come, and we did this thing called nurture groups, which I made up because I was like, I hate networking, and I want something different, I want a different experience. And there are still people who have ongoing contracts. Yes. Okay, I'm just gonna stop. Who still have, just raise your hand if you can't hear me, who still have ongoing contracts and collaborations and relationships with the people they met at that meeting 2.5 years ago. And so that's why we do events like this. So about 1.5 years ago, I got it in my head that I wanted to do a full day conference where people could like really dive in and get to know each other. And at the same time, had the opportunity to apply for a sustainability grant. And my background before I got into sort of these workshops and things was in urban planning, climate change, and transportation. So I was like, I'm gonna put these two things together, and it's gonna be awesome. And I'm going to introduce the keynote speech and then the keynote prompt, and then we'll dive into the breakout sessions. We'll take about a 5 to 10 minute break after, in between the different elements, so that we can, people can use the bathroom and re-up on coffee and tea. When that's gone, it's gone. There's no reinforcements, so get some now if you need it. And then, again, let me know if you have any questions. So our first speaker today, I'm gonna test this second microphone. Can you hear me? Okay. Our first speaker today is, I think I'm going to get your name wrong, Tay Nguyen. And she is a local activist who I am so excited to hear from. She's been on my radar for a couple of years. A friend recommended that I look into her work, and she does a lot of really interesting work around womanhood and I don't know how to say it, like I'm taking up space, and I've never gotten to hear her speak in person, so I'm super excited about this. So please give a round of applause for Tay Nguyen.
And friends who since 2014 have been doing demonstrations, community forums, youth programs around holding spaces for creative resistance and addressing issues ranging from police brutality to the school to prison pipeline, and just building up youth voice and power in Tacoma. So I'm here to share a little bit about survival and how women of color sustain the world. And I'm also going to be sharing a poem with you today as well. So. Sustain. Verb. To strengthen or support physically or mentally, says Google.com. To undergo or suffer something unpleasant, especially an injury, says Cambridge English Dictionary. To hold up the world, says me, says my mother, says my grandmother, and her mother, and her mother, and her mother. To carry the weight of the universe that intends to crush our spirit and still make it brighter, make it better, make it stronger, make it last, says Mrs. Nina Simone, Maya Angelou, Winnie Mandela, Miss Major, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Leili Hayslip, Yuri Kochiyama, the foremothers and the descendants of women of color whose names could never fit in any single citation of how exactly it is that this world continues to turn. I am, because they are. I am a child of freedom fighters, jungle soldiers, boat people, rice fields, water buffalo, ancestral worship, and salt water. I come from a country whose name you only know because it's what America named a war that it will never admit responsibility for exacerbating. Whose name you only know because it's sewn into the tags of many of the clothes and purchases and everyday things in stores. I work full-time in the nonprofit industrial complex, where I've once spent 3 years giving my free labor and love as an intern and volunteer to a queer youth organization that didn't hire me when a position opened up for the duties I was already performing until I could deliver a satisfactory story about my coming out. Because the white male director wasn't convinced I was truly queer, meaning he couldn't relate to why coming out wasn't my priority. He couldn't relate to having one's racial existence in public constantly and firstly confronted head on. He couldn't relate to the reality that being brown, Asian, and immigrant means that to be able to proclaim one's sexual orientation is both a luxury and privilege. He couldn't relate to living in between two different tongues, one colonizer and one native, where the latter is still a language that hasn't yet found the words for how one's heart moves and loves. I work full-time in the nonprofit industrial complex, which often includes my attendance at external meetings where I'm the only person of color, where I quickly become the angry, disgruntled, or self-righteous one, where I'm met with silence inside of the meeting room, but pats on the backs for my eloquence and whispers of guilty agreement outside of the meeting room. I'm a master in sustainability. Sustainability is in keeping food on the table and all of my loved ones fed. Sustainability is in paying my rent, health, car, and phone bills on time. Sustainability is in working one job and 3 side hustles to earn a living and make a way for my next of kin, because in America, vid women earn only 64 cents for every dollar a white man makes. Sustainability is in accepting mispronunciations of my complicated name or being plainly addressed as hey, because conserving my energy means picking and choosing my battles. Sustainability is in code switching and over-employing gentle, I feel blank when you blank statements, because double consciousness calls on just enough of my sanity to employ protective charades in the face of white fragility. Sustainability as in existing and persisting because the fire wages on in my chest. Sustainability as in trying, surviving, grinding, and organizing, because in America there is greater motivation to reduce waste than there is to address the apparent disposability of Black, queer, and trans lives. There is greater motivation to fund eco-friendly buildings than there is to pay Black and brown women who work in those very buildings an equitable wage. For women of color, survival is the unnamed art by which we sustain the world. I am my mother's prodigy. I am my grandma's legacy. And it goes without saying that my existence here and my resistance here as a queer immigrant woman is only made more possible because of Black and Indigenous women who have long strengthened or supported, undergone or suffered, held up and carried the weight of this country before me. We survive this world every day. And because we survive, the world does too. I want to end by telling you a story. This story began as one about my grandmother. But as I wrote it, I discovered it was also about my mother and her sisters and me and my sisters and the women from my beloved homeland and women of color across the world. This is an homage to us, a story about how we've always sustained the world, and an invitation for our collective imagination of a world where sustainability becomes obsolete because women of color are truly free. This piece is called Bông Ngoại, which means grandma in Vietnamese, and it's about breaking free. I carry grandma's sorrow like I do her last name, and hold onto resentment from my unforgiven pain. 7 decades in the marriage, labor mainly was in vain. While her nation was at war, she fought to love despite the strain. Raising babies by the dozen while her husband was away. Offering prayers to the elders, pushing forward day to day. She was faithful, always strong, but her back hunched as she aged, buried her daughter and her trauma to conceal what left a stain. The war forced all her sons to make a way in a new place. While they toiled overseas, she raised the girls and vowed to wait. Walking miles to a prison where her spouse is locked away. When the time came, they arranged for his journey to the States. At a refugee camp in Thailand is where she learned her twisted fate. The man she married had an affair, while over there she still remained. The way her heart had split apart, the ocean span couldn't equate. And if you measured with God's arms, the size of grief would be too great. In the end, she made it here, and they built life on sullied slates. And she carried on in quiet, seldom speaking of the ache. But like blood, her daughters carry all the shadows in their veins. Every overdue apology evolves into self-hate. Those who cut never responsible, those who bleed are made to stay. Patriarchs not held accountable, only women bear the weight. Liability be slated to the mothers, aunts, and daughters, leaving ghosts for them to harbor for the uncles, sons, and fathers. And I see the shadows that I am made to follow, that ma and her ma stifled. They're stuck inside a cycle, said I see the shadows that sit inside the hollow of my own mother's sorrow. We're stuck inside a cycle, said I see the shadows of yesterday's tomorrow, new record, same recital, generational cycle. If I don't break the cycle, then life is just survival. My seeds will be revivals. I got to break the cycle. We've got to break the cycle. I've got to break the cycle. For my next of kin to thrive, I've got to break the cycle. Thank you.